And away we go with college football best bets presented by FanDuel. Yeah, both guys over 500 last week. Danny, 10-6. Chip Patterson continues to crush it. Another week of wins. He is now 85-66 on the season in our best bets for top 25 college football games. Welcome on in. Chris Hassel, joined by Danny Kanell in studio. Chip Patterson is with us as well. We are going to start with the biggest game of the week. It's number 4 at number 3, but number 4 is favored. That is Ohio State at Penn State, Danny, because we don't know at this time. We're full disclosure, this is Tuesday afternoon. We don't know if Drew Aller's going to play. We might not know until game time.
We may not, and I pretty much would guarantee you that James Franklin is not going to tell you who's starting for him to use that competitive advantage. You know a play that's worked really well for me this year? Home underdogs, and that's where I'm rolling with in this situation. Even with the uncertainty at quarterback, I do have a feeling that Drew Aller will be good enough to go after a week of rest of that lower body injury. But even if he doesn't, Bo Pribula last week stepped in pretty well. James Franklin heaped praise on his quarterback, the backup, who came in and managed the game. But I think Penn State's formula is slow this game down no matter who is playing, because they want to keep it away from that high-powered Ohio State offense, and they can do it with Abdul Carter and the rest of that front seven, which is about as physical as Ohio State will have faced this season. I think they get Katron Allen, Nick Singleton going. I think there's a healthy dose of Tyler Warren, but I think it's one or two big plays to the pass game that Andy Koltnicki draws up that will be the difference. I think this is a field goal game all day, so give me Penn State and those 3.5 points. I love that hook. I'll take the home underdog, Chip.
Yeah, for all of the talent that is on the field for both of these teams, I just know this is going to be a hard-fought, low-scoring game that's decided at the line of scrimmage. Obviously, some other people agree because we've seen the full game total drop by almost a field goal since the look-ahead and the opener. So that's why I'm going to go to a place that is very comfortable, which is in some of these heavyweight battles, especially the ones that involve Ohio State. I'm going to be looking at the first half under. I mean, look at Ohio State's whole season. This has been a slow starting team, and the other side of the Buckeyes being one of the best third quarter teams in America is they are not one of the best first and second quarter teams. And for the Penn State side of this, I totally agree with you, Danny. They want to shorten this game. They want to ride that home field advantage. They want Ohio State to be not able to hear themselves during crucial one possession snaps deep into the game. I think they run the football. I think they limit the exposure on Drew Aller to get another injury or make it worse early. So I'm going to be going to the first half under in what should be an absolute slobber knocker between these two Big Ten rivals.
That is a noon Eastern time game. The folks in Happy Valley not happy that it's not a night game, but it is big noon for those guys. Also at noon on CBS, it's the only unbeaten Group of 5 team remaining. Army. Minus 22.5 at home against Air Force. For reference, Air Force is not good this season. For reference, they lost at home to Navy 34-7. Air Force is not good.
No, they are struggling. 1-6 on the season. Very uncharacteristic for Troy Calhoun's squad. And I am not going to get in front of the freight train that is the Army Black Knights in front of this one. Chip, if you remember, I gave you a little nugget a couple weeks ago. I said, do you know who's leading the country in rushing touchdowns? And it's Bryson Daly. And you pointed out, well, he's got an extra game over Ashton Genty. Well, guess who's still leading the country in rushing touchdowns? Bryson Daly, the quarterback for Army, still has one more at 19 than Ashton Genty. I think they are going to keep this thing rolling. They have their eyes set on the college football playoff, and Air Force is a wounded duck coming in there. I think this thing continues to roll, so I'll go ahead and back Army. One of only 2 teams who has won every game this season by 2 touchdowns or more. They need to be over 3, but I think they do get that 22.5 point margin of victory.
Let's see, 34 plus 7, that's 41. Oh, the market has overcorrected the other way. That number kept getting lower and lower and lower on the total, and then all of a sudden we saw the most preposterous thing, and that is an over in a Service Academy game. But we're right back where we need to be. We're right back over 41, which means I am right back on the under, because the key to this one is the fact that Air Force has struggled so much on offense. And the fact that Army has been a team when they're going up against teams that are lesser competition, then that is exactly where Air Force has been, much closer to a lot of the teams that Jeff Monken's group has gone up against. The defense has done a terrific job of being able to limit the scoring and limit the scoring opportunities. I think we see the same thing here, where Army getting back in and getting focused and tuned up for a run. That's something Army has not been a part of, a conference championship race. I expect a business-like approach, and I expect another under in a Service Academy game. Give me the under 41.5.
And Army will get Notre Dame as well later on this season at Yankee Stadium. Another one of those fake road games for Notre Dame that they like to play. CBS 3:30. Right after that one, it's a big one in the Big Ten. #1 Oregon going to the Big House, and Michigan a 2-touchdown dog at home for the first time since Brady Hoke was the coach in 2013, Danny.
Yeah, this is probably one of my least favorite plays because I love the Oregon Ducks, and I think they're the #1 team in the country. But this is a tricky spot for them. They have been so good, and yes, they answered the test versus Ohio State. But outside of that game, this is probably one of their bigger tests of the season. It's on the road, and a team that really has been struggling to find any form of offense. But their defense still could be problematic for the Oregon Ducks, and that's what I'm counting on for Michigan to keep this inside the number. Another home team playing with a big number. I'll take those 15.5 points because the defense keeps them in the game. Will Johnson, questionable for this one. Don't know if he's hurt, how serious that injury is. That would concern me a little bit more so if I knew he wasn't going to play. With his status unknown, I'm going to say maybe he gives it a go. And the interior of that defensive line, led by Mason Graham, makes it uncomfortable for Dylan Gabriel to just go back there and pick that defense apart. And I think Michigan tries to slow the game down with Davis Warren under center now. We know their identity is going to be run the football. I think they're able to do that and keep it inside this number. But I like Oregon to win, probably closer to 2 touchdowns, not over that 15.5.
Oregon, #1 in the polls, one of the best teams in the country, one of the best first half teams in the country. They have just been putting opponents away early, and then they just kind of cruise. I mean, their second half scoring margins are not all that impressive, but it's because the games are just not competitive with how strong the Ducks have been in the first 30 minutes of play. I mean, there's so many different sides to this. Among them, Will Stein, with the Oregon offensive coordinator, getting even more comfortable with how to call a game for Dylan Gabriel. The fact that their running back room is really taken off. Noah Whittington doing a good job providing some balance for Jordan James. I mean, this is a group that has even been without their veteran tight end Terrence Ferguson for the last couple of games, and still they have found ways in the red zone to turn those opportunities into touchdowns. I'm just so impressive with the way that Oregon starts. I'm not going to stop taking them in the first half. So instead of sweating a backdoor, instead of sweating the way it's going to be in those late stages of a game that I think Oregon will have in hand, I'm just going to take Oregon in the first half and keep riding that train.
And Chip will be there, part of our coverage on HQ leading up to that game at the Big House in Ann Arbor. Let's go from the #1 team to the #2 team. It's the Georgia Bulldogs, neutral site here, Jacksonville, against a Florida team, Danny, that has been better than I think a lot of people thought they were. They've won 3 of 4. The one loss was on the road in overtime to Tennessee.
They have been feisty, and I actually really like the opportunity to get to see DJ Lagway under center. Hate seeing the injury to Graham Mertz, but this team has been feisty, as you mentioned. And in large part, their defense has played pretty well. And from what I've seen from Georgia's offense, we saw them shaky against Kentucky. We saw them shaky against Texas. Even though they won that game, that offense did not look great. Carson Beck had 3 touchdowns. Rumor has it he was here partying in Fort Lauderdale during the bye week. I kid. He was here. But I'm curious to see how they get things ramped back up. And for Florida, this is a rivalry game for them. I think it's a huge number. But I'm going to go ahead and take the under because I do think Georgia's defense will be able to pretty much keep the offense of Florida in check. But I also think Florida's defense will be able to do the same for Georgia. So I like the under 52.5 in this one.
I love this rivalry. I love the way that it always works in the rhythm of the season, the off week leading into it. It means that I think we can trust some of the history in this series. And here's what I mean by that. In each of the last 7 meetings in this series, the favorite has covered. The last 10 meetings in this series have been decided by double digits. These games are not close, y'all. Dogs on top. I'm going to take Georgia. I'm going to lay the big number. And we really need to ask ourselves, if Carson Beck gets out there and starts throwing a whole bunch of touchdowns and limiting the interceptions, was it the Mackenzie Brooks bump? Was he so inspired by his visit to Fort Lauderdale then that he's going to come out just locked in? It's possible. I'll have my eyes on it, but I'm going to trust the series history, and I'm going to take the Dogs to cover the big number.
Yeah, you guys bumped into Carson Beck during his bye week down here in the Fort Lauderdale area. Chip, thank you for that pick. Let's move on to a top 20 matchup. It's the only other top 25 game this year, or this week, I should say, other than the number 4 versus number 3, Ohio State, Penn State. And Pitt and SMU, Danny, both unbeaten in the ACC, 2 of the 4 teams that are still unbeaten in conference play.
Yes, and I love the story. These are the 2 of the stronger teams in the ACC. Pitt might be my favorite one, especially based on expectations. SMU was a trendy pick based on schedule. Rhett Lashley, having a team that had some veterans return, and Pitt was exposed to be a 4-win team potentially, and yet Pat Narduzzi has bucked that trend, and I have loved them, but I do think that Cinderella run comes to an end here in Dallas against the Mustangs here. SMU last week had their slip-up game. That was their wake-up call. They had to block a field goal late. Duke went for 2. There was a ton of turnovers, very sloppy game, but I think they return home. They're kind of used to things without R.J. Maryland, their big tight end, who's a weapon in that offense, their leading receiver. They're getting acclimated to life without him. I think SMU wins and covers at home.
No. We've got to have some bull don't lie, okay? Because since 2000, there have only been 2 teams that have had a -6 turnover differential and won. And one of them was SMU. How in the world? It is statistically improbable for you to have a -6 turnover differential and win. Give me Pitt plus the 7.5. And you mentioned R.J. Maryland. As I was paying attention to the crazy finish there between SMU and Duke, you know what else I saw? I saw a lot of SMU players kind of hobbling off. I think this is a banged up Mustangs team. Now, they have been able to, withstand, Kevin Jennings get a little bit shaken up. He grits it out. He comes back. But they're losing pass catchers. They're losing other skill position players. I'm just wondering, and I will say, Pitt quarterback Eli Holstein, his status is a little bit unknown as well. It might be some Nate Yarnell in there, but I just think that SMU is a little bit too vulnerable, and they've been playing with fire a little bit too much to be trusted with 7.5 against a Pitt team that has beaten everybody and has found ways to win different kinds of games.
Weird week in college football because 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturday is the latest kick of the week. There are no games kicking off at 9 or 10,
I know you love it. It's a 10-hour
I do.
sleep
I mean,
guy.
I've been staying up till 3 watching some of these games and the last few weeks, and it's just killed me for Sunday and Monday. Let's recap the picks from the guys who do not agree really on anything at this point.
Yeah.
Danny and Chip, both coming off winning weeks. Danny back in Penn State, the home dog. Back in Army, the home favorite. Michigan, the home dog. That's kind of been the theme for Danny. Home dogs. For Chip, I mean, he's a little bit of everything, including that first half under in the Ohio State-Penn State game and the Oregon first half line of -7.5 against Michigan. Continuing to pick every ranked college football game against the spread. Mentioned that there's no games that kick off after 8 p.m. on Saturday. We do have a ranked team in action during the week. It's Boise State, Friday night, 8 Eastern, at home against a San Diego State that's 3-4 overall, but unbeaten in Mountain West play. And we'll start with that one with Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson. Boise laying 23.5 at home. Ashton Jeanty, Danny, still on pace to break Barry Sanders' all-time single-season rushing record.
It's amazing, even considering he had one of his lowest rushing performances last week against UNLV on Friday night, and they got the cover by a half a point, which still bothers me because I took UNLV in that one. I'm not going to go against them this time. I'm going to attack the total. I'm going to take the under here because I do think teams are realizing, hey, let's do a little bit more bend, don't break. Let's get a lot of players around the football to make sure we all bring Ashton Jeanty down, and it is starting to work, putting more pressure on that pass game. But Boise State still tries to run the football while that clock is ticking away. Ashton Jeanty also got banged around a little bit. He had that arm injury that he still played through. He's tough as nails. But the number's huge. I want to back San Diego State, but Boise State is so good, so I'm going to stay away from that and take the under in the game because I think San Diego State knows the importance of slowing this game down, taking as many possessions as they can from Boise State. So I like the under. Yeah, let him sing.
Let him sing, baby. This is a perfect spot. Great call. 100% agree. And I'm going to actually highlight San Diego State here because this is a tough rebuild that Sean Lewis has. And looking at the way San Diego State played Washington State, if you don't know John Mateer, the dual threat quarterback for Washington State can be really explosive, really electric. And this San Diego State defense held them in check. And I'm not going to argue that San Diego State's defense is right up there with Texas or right up there with Georgia or any of these other top-rated defenses, but I do think it's a group that does a good job of playing complementary football because most of these scores that we've seen in San Diego State games are all in the 20s, and will Boise State test that 100%? But I think the way that San Diego State is going out there trying to limit scoring, low possession, complementary football, give themselves a chance to keep it close as long as possible, I think that sets up for a great opportunity to attack this number, especially at this advantageous 56.5 number.
Okay, it is trivia question time for our next game, which is Duke at number 5, Miami. Cam Ward and the Hurricanes are averaging close to 47 points per game through 8 games this season. That is not the most in ACC history through 8 games, though. Any idea who and when is on top?
I mean, I did my research.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, that number's cute, by the way. Like, that's a cute little number, 40s. Chip, do you happen to know?
Is it 2013 Florida State?
That's a really good guess.
Well,
that's a really good guess. They were on average
51.
51.
Yeah,
that is a lot of points. That's a lot of points through 8 games.
But
the 1995 squad with Warwick Dunn in the backfield and Andre Cooper and E.G. Green on the outside catching passes from your boy was 56.1 points per game. At this point in the season, I think we had already put up 370 burgers on a couple of teams. That was
NC State, Wake Forest, and Duke.
Yes.
70 plus. Now, it is interesting to note that one of those games is a loss. At number 24, Virginia, in the 8th game of the season. But still, Danny Kanell and those 95 Seminoles holding the record there. This is the first time Manny Diaz is facing his former team.
It is. This is a tricky spot for Miami if we were talking about the Miami of the last 20 years, where they would typically have all these letdown games and they couldn't live up to the hype and expectations. This team feels different, and I think it stems from Mario Cristobal, and I think it stems from Cam Ward, their superstar quarterback, who continues to deliver no matter what the situation is. He's cool, calm, and collected in the pocket. He searches for those he goes big game hunting all the time, and most of the time he comes up big when those plays are there to be made. I think it's going to be a long day for Duke. Yes, I could see maybe a sluggish start with a noon kickoff in a sleepy Miami stadium, but this team doesn't need a crowd. They kind of self-motivate. They want to go out there and prove to everybody they're not a fluke like they've been in years past. I think Miami rolls big in this one.
Give me the Blue Devils. I'm looking at this game. You mentioned the spot, right? You're coming out of the Florida State win. You got Mario banging the table. You know, we run the state. The Cam Ward halftime speech to his team about restoring Miami's position, you know, within that rivalry. But I think there's also a matter of the game script, the game play, because the 2 lowest passing totals for Cam Ward this season have been the last 2 games. And what we have seen is Miami really start to lean on the ground game, on Damian Martinez, on being able to run behind that big offensive line. I just could see Miami dominating the game the way it feels without dominating the game necessarily on the scoreboard. Duke has been able to exceed odds makers' expectations all year by being able to do what Manny Diaz calls dragging you into the sewer. And I just think that they do enough of the tiny things well to the point where they are going to be able to go and hang in this game, at least according to this spread, deep into the 4th quarter and give themselves a chance to cover. Again, Miami's running the football a lot. That means less possessions, shorter games, harder to blow teams out. So I'll go with Duke plus the 20.5.
All right, let's go to the SEC. Ole Miss has been sputtering a bit. They're ranked number 19, 7.5-point road favorites, Chip, at Arkansas.
Yeah, Ole Miss unders have been kind of an ATM. You think about the way that Arkansas played Tennessee. You think about the way that Arkansas has gone up into some of their most competitive games. Talon Green absolutely diced up Mississippi State, sure, but in these punch-up moments, the Razorbacks have been more than happy to try to play a physical game behind that defensive line and out-scheme you with Bobby Petrino there as the offensive coordinator. I think that Ole Miss are so banged up along the offensive line. It's hard to imagine them being able to run the ball successfully against this Arkansas defensive front. Trey Harris's availability is still a concern. Jackson Dart has not really been his dominant self. I mean, in conference play, Ole Miss's statistics have fallen off a cliff. So I could absolutely see, especially here in Fayetteville, this being a game that's played on Arkansas's terms. And that, to me, is a little bit lower scoring. So I'm going to go with the under.
I feel like we have a stolen ATM card and we know the PIN and we're just getting it back in there, maxing out the daily limit every day because these Ole Miss unders, 7 games in a row, they have hit on. So I'm on the same exact side as you are. But you know what else I'm on? I'm on Arkansas as another home dog playing in Fayetteville. When I see Lane Kiffin out there complaining about LSU getting another night home game and he's worried about what's happening in 2 weeks versus what's happening this weekend, I see a team that's distracted and thinking about the wrong things, and it stems from their head coach. You mentioned the Trey Harris loss. I think that is huge. This team has not been running the football either with very much success. And Arkansas's defense has been pretty feisty and physical. Ole Miss better be ready for a fist fight or else they're going to get beat outright. I love Arkansas as the home dog here, especially since it's over that touchdown number. Bobby Petrino has found something in Talon Green, really done a good job developing him. I think they're able to put up enough points on that Ole Miss defense to keep this game extremely tight. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they won the game outright.
Woo pig. They've covered 4 straight against Ole Miss. They've won 2 of the last 3. Let's go to the Big Ten and maybe the most head-scratching spread of the week, Danny. Minnesota at number 24, Illinois. No, they just got smoked by Oregon, but Oregon's on another level. Minnesota's favored by 2.5 here.
Yeah, I was surprised by this one. This tells me to stay the heck away from this number. I'm going to do that. I think Chip and I are on the exact exact opposite sides of this one. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think this is where Illinois' defense gets back on track. They've given up a lot of points recently against Purdue when they saw a quarterback making his first start. You saw an offense you hadn't seen. And then against Oregon, who's putting up points on everybody. But against the teams that are on par or level with Illinois, they've done a better job. And Max Brosmer comes in. He's been playing really good quarterback for Minnesota. But the last 2 road games, they played at Michigan, put up 24 points in a loss. They played at UCLA, put up 21 points in a win. They have not been actually an offensive juggernaut on the road. I think Illinois is able to contain them. I have no idea who wins this one, but I think it's a lower scoring affair. Give me that under.
Yeah, I am on the opposite side of this. I love this quarterback matchup. You mentioned Max Brosmer. He was doing the row the boat celebration. He's all in. He is comfortable in PJ Fleck's program, and he has been dealing. He's been playing well, and that has been so important because if Minnesota's offense is just going to be Darius Taylor or bust, then defenses are going to be able to scheme them into difficult situations. When you have to respect the downfield passing attack, now all of a sudden that's going to open everything up. I also think that Minnesota defensively is not going to be able to just load up to stop the run because that's not even what Luke Altmaier and Illinois offense wants to do. So I see this one, yes, being a little bit more of a back and forth, not necessarily a wild shootout, but at 45.5, I think that number is just a little bit too low. So I'll go ahead and take the over in this one.
Look, we pick every single ranked team that's in action, but really, there's only one team that matters here on our pick show, and that's the Iowa State Cyclones, who are coming off a bye week, hosting Texas Tech. Heavy favorites here, Danny, but what have you heard about how that bye week went?
Do you know what people are saying about this Iowa State team?
What's that?
They're saying this is the most overrated 11th ranked team in the history of college football, that they're not athletic enough to go with the top tier teams in the Big 12. And all you had to do was watch that UCF game, which they squeaked by, barely getting lucky to beat a UCF team that's not very good. So they're saying there's no way this Iowa State team could possibly win the Big 12. You know what? That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying this thing keeps rolling. I think they are legit. I think this is one of the best teams that Matt Campbell has had under his tenure. Rocco Becht has really flourished at the quarterback position, making great decisions with the football. And you've got a defense which has been playing lights out. Texas Tech comes limping into this game. Baron Morton, their quarterback, banged up, had to leave the loss against TCU. By the way, they've lost 2 in a row. Give me Iowa State, lay those points, and hopefully it's the motivation they need to hear all those critics out there taking shots at them, Chris.
It's been working for him, Chip.
Look, maybe I need to show up in a Lubbock hype video because this Texas Tech defense is Swiss cheese. You let Baylor just run through wide open holes for explosive plays. You have this great lead against TCU. Then all of a sudden, giving up big touchdowns. I mean, you've given up 529 yards and 461 yards in your last 2 games. I think this Texas Tech defense is a group that we can exploit, especially after, kind of giving away the game a week ago. Iowa State comes in rested, comes in refreshed. They're playing at home. Give me the Iowa State team total over. Now we get this thing at 34.5. I think that Rocco Becht, he gets to rest a little bit. He said he was sore after his 20 rushing attempts in that win a couple weeks ago. I think the ground game leads to explosive runs. I think Iowa State pours it on. So I'll go Iowa State team total over in this one.
And stays perfect.
Sounds like Chip heard what everybody else did too. They were reading their press clippings, just enjoying the party of being undefeated at this point, not taking the season seriously. I'm not buying it though.
Chip, good luck showing up in the Lubbock the press clippings over there, the hype video for the Red Raiders who have lost 2 straight. Those are the picks for some of the mid-afternoon games. When we come back, how about a SIG for the road? Signetti going to Michigan State and maybe getting his starting quarterback back. We've got 5 more games to pick against the spread from this week's top 25 teams in action. Indiana is going on the road. So is Texas A&M, only a 2.5-point favorite in Columbia, South Carolina. Chris Hassel and Danny Kanell in studio. Chip Patterson is getting ready to take his talents to Ann Arbor for the #1 Oregon Ducks at the Wolverines. But let's go to the Big Ten here with Indiana laying 7.5 on the road at Michigan State. And Chip, Indiana, we still don't know who's going to start at quarterback, but they could get potentially Curtis Rourke back from that thumb injury.
Yeah, as we're sitting here having this conversation, the latest word is optimistic. They're just going to have to wait until later in the week, see how Rourke is holding it, see how he's spinning it, things that are very important. But in this game plan, I mean, you got to think that Indiana has to be so encouraged, even if they do put Taven Jackson out there, that they are going to be able to lean on the run game behind an offensive line that's been playing at such a high level. And the thing that I love about this Indiana team from the wagering perspective has been just how consistent they are, because so many of these teams, they're high, they're low, they're one team, they're another. Indiana has been basically the same thing for all 60 minutes, which is why smoke them through the filter, Coach Sig. We're going back to Indiana in the 4th quarter. Minus a 1.5 because nobody plays through the whistle like the Hoosiers. This has been something that has been cashing week after week. It doesn't matter whether it's a close game and they pull away. It doesn't matter whether they're already up a bunch like they were against Nebraska, because they are relentless and they continue to try and score. So not really sure about the quarterback status. I do think Indiana wins the game, but the thing that I am most confident about is that they're going to bring it their all for all 4 quarters. So that's why we go back to Hoosiers 4th quarter.
Yeah, I think we can both win our bets, because I wasn't sure about the number. I've tried to take the dogs against Indiana and been burned one too many times. But this really is their first true road game. Hear me out. They played UCLA at the Rose Bowl early in the season. That's not a huge home field advantage. They played Northwestern on the lake at the practice facility, which is like 5,000 fans. It's not exactly hostile. Going to East Lansing against a team that's 500, Michigan State, that it's been better and better every single week they've gone. Had a nice win against Iowa a couple weeks ago. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
I think this isn't going to get your best effort early, and I think it might take Indiana a minute to get into the flow of this game on the road, no matter who's playing quarterback. Even as Curtis Rourke comes back, how much is they impacted by that surgery? Does it slow them down somewhat through the air and make them a little bit one-dimensional? So I'm going to take Michigan State first half plus 4.5. I think Indiana wins this game. They've proven to be extremely equipped to deal with any adversity. I love Chip's side there too. Maybe we can both get a couple of winners on this one.
Thread that needle, baby. Thread that needle. If we get DK gets his first half, I get my fourth quarter, we all go home happy. I love it.
Everybody wins, and that's all Indiana's been doing is winning this season. Let's go to Kansas State at Houston. Chip, I'm guessing you saw the same note I did, that Houston is 7-1 to the under this season.
Yeah, this is a spot where you just know that Kansas State, going into this game, is going to be more than happy to just run the football, because it is very difficult to imagine Houston's offense is going to pose any kind of threat, because they have not all season long. As you can see here, the inability for Houston's offense to create explosive plays or maintain drives have been the reason why they are one of the lowest scoring teams in all of college football, and why the unders have continued to cash. So as Kansas State has some really big games coming up, and they've got their eyes on trying to compete for a Big 12 title, I think that in this spot on the road at Houston, you lean on DJ Giddens, you lean on that ground attack, and you are more than happy to get out with a win by any margin. So don't dance with whether it's going to be 7, 10, 14, or 17. Just know that Houston ain't going to score a bunch, and so we'll be under the total yet again in a Cougs game.
Yeah, I win by 7 or 10 or 11 or 12, just not by more than 12.5, because I'm taking Houston as the home dog. And this really, to me, is the Big 12 bet. I've made this bet several times throughout the season on Big 12 teams, no matter what their record is, including last week when Kansas State faced Kansas, and Kansas was a bottom dweller, and yet that game came down to the wire. I don't know if this one has as much upset potential. Houston's defense has actually been the bright spot, but they have beat some other Big 12 teams in TCU and Utah last week. They're playing with more confidence. Willie Fritz, the offense has been atrocious, but the defense has been a bright spot. I think they get enough defense to keep it inside the number, playing at home. I'll take the 12.5 points.
All right, let's go to Texas A&M, hitting the road to South Carolina, not even a field goal favorite on the road. Mike Elko asked about how he plans on treating the quarterback situation on Monday, and he really wouldn't shed any light on it. But, Danny, it's got to be Reed, right?
It has to be, unless this is why this number is where it is. Maybe they are going back to Connor Wegman, because I would have expected them to be bigger favorites, and I would have expected more people to be all over this one. Now, the public is all over Texas A&M in that 2.5 number. Why is it so small? South Carolina is not very good. South Carolina's defensive front has been the bright spot for Shane Beamer's squad. But, Chris, you mentioned it. I think Marcel Reed makes this team an SEC championship contender. That's how much of a difference I think he makes. We saw this offense completely explode once he entered the game last week against LSU. I think they would be crazy. I think whoever would go back to Connor Wegman should have their head examined. But I'm counting on Marcel Reed being under center, and it's enough for them to be able to run the football with he and Le'Veon Moss, and just enough big play potential in the pass game to get the win and cover. All back A&M here in Columbia.
Yeah, I've seen this movie before, because we've got quarterbacks that can move, running games that are far more consistent than the downfield passing attacks. Not an overwhelming number of like real difference makers at the wide receiver position that scare you for either one of these teams. Two absolutely tenacious defensive fronts that can really get after it and just make 3rd and long an absolute losing scenario. I think that this is a prime under position. Going to be a little bit of a sweat, because we are talking about an under in the 40s for your shorties, but I do think that the way that both teams run the ball and the way that both teams have so many difference makers along the defensive line, a 21-17 type game is what I'm envisioning in a raucous atmosphere. Because remember, that is the game that South Carolina can win. That is the kind of game where South Carolina can maybe pull off this upset. So I don't think South Carolina is going to pull off the upset, but I think they will be competitive enough. And if they're competitive, it's because their defense has stood up for them. And so I'm going to go under the total.
Big Saturday night in that state, because you've got that one in Columbia, and then over in Death Valley, Clemson at home against Louisville. Danny, Are you stealing a page out of the Chip's playbook here, the old Chipalytics playbook?
Yes, and I am shocked that he's not on this one with me. I'm going to go ahead and take Clemson first half and lay the 6.5 under a touchdown. Are you kidding me? With one of those teams that has come out the gate almost every single game this season. And then you put that against the Louisville squad, who found themselves down 20-0 last week against Boston College before coming roaring back. Put those two together. This is one of my favorite bets of the week. Cade Klubnik, by the way, is fifth in the Heisman standings, just outside those top 4, completely flying under the radar. He's been putting up spectacular numbers in this Clemson offense. I think they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in the ACC. I think they prove it. The 10.5 makes me, I'm a little bit worried about the backdoor cover, so I'm just going to take the first half.
Danny, I do like that. You know, come Thursday, we might let the children sing on that one too. I might need a 2-for-1 special because I really didn't have to think about this one that much. Death Valley at night is different. You can say it about Baton Rouge, but you can also say it about Clemson, South Carolina, because all the players and any other team that's been there understand that that place really does roar in a different way when you do get that Clemson team coming down the hill under the lights. I kind of think Louisville just hasn't been playing great. They had to climb back from a big hole against Boston College. We saw them go blow for blow against Miami, but again, not able to come out with the winning plays. I just think the cards are a little bit too shaky to be trustworthy, even in a backdoor situation, given where Clemson is at in their season, given that scenario of playing at Death Valley at night. So I'll take Clemson with the full game, but 6.5 in the first half. I love that too.
All right, children, close to singing. Maybe we'll see it Thursday on the pod. Let's go to another shade of orange here. Really the same shade, but it's Tennessee orange, they call it. And actually, they're not going to be wearing the orange uniforms. Yeah, Danny, they're going to be wearing those Halloween blacks this weekend against Kentucky.
I love those unis. I can't stand the fact that Tennessee is the 7th ranked team in the country. Are you kidding me? Based off of what? A win against an Alabama team, which is a shell of what they've used to been, in a game where they needed some late game heroics, and Nico Iamaleava left about 200 passing yards out on the field. Give me Kentucky in this game. Mark Stoops has been watching this film of this offense struggle. Now, what scares me is that Kentucky's offense is not going to put up many points. I'd probably also lean towards the under, but with this many points, a Kentucky team which has already gone toe-to-toe with Georgia, lost by 1 point, which went on the road and beat Ole Miss, which was toe-to-toe with Vanderbilt, which is one of the better teams this year in the SEC. Give me Kentucky. Oh, I did take the under. How about that, Chris? 2-for-1 special. Give me Kentucky and the under in this one.
Tennessee, Kentucky, kind of a sneaky rivalry. You know, Tennessee's got like 1 billion rivals, so it's kind of hard to keep track of them all. But this is a game that Tennessee is going to be geared up for. They've won 3 in a row. They've won 5 of the last 6. They've won 10 of the last 12 against the Wildcats. Multiple head coaches, multiple regimes, and still the Vols seem to come out on top. You mentioned Kentucky's offense. I think that they are broken beyond repair. Kentucky has been one of the biggest droppers in the CBS Sports 134 over recent weeks. They are close to last place in the SEC, and things are bad. And I think that Tennessee, going up against this Kentucky team, sees a chance to really restart its confidence and get refocused on its final stretch of the season. So, yeah, give me Tennessee and all of these points.
Let's have another winning week, fellas. Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell, part of the Cover 3 podcast. Latest episode today, Big Ten specific. Beanie Wells on the program, former Ohio State great, ahead of that Ohio State-Penn State game this weekend. They also talk Oregon-Michigan, which is on CBS.